Hersman joins us. Deborah is now president of the National Safety Council. So glad that both of you could join us. Unfortunately, you have far too much expertise in the matters such as these. Deborah, I'll start with you since you're here. We talk about the location of this debris, not far from that last known communication with the plane, about 6 miles. What does that tell you? Things happen fairly quickly for this plane?
It does. It tells you that things happen fairly quickly, but it also gives you some confidence that the things that we knew from past investigative activities, finding the last known location of the plane, are very important. I think the 370 investigation really threw people off, and I think
it changed our expectations, really, didn't it?
It really did, and I think it made people question a lot of the things that had worked for us in the past. But you follow those protocols, you follow those procedures, you know where that last radar hit, where that last communication was, and what the crew might have communicated at the end. That will help you walk things back to be able to find where the aircraft could be and the best search pattern to look for.
And Jim, that's a very good point that Deborah makes, is that, we learn, sadly, we learn from these tragedies and from these crashes. This, it would appear, has gone sort of, I hate even saying this, but it's sort of a textbook investigation in terms of a few days after the crash, debris is found, and now the tough work begins.
Every investigation is different. This one, I believe, will underscore the need for floatable black boxes and emergency locating transmitters, a technology that's available in the military, as well as for cameras in the cockpit. A recommendation that was made in 1999 when I was chairman of the NTSB.
Deborah, that's a good point. He talks about those calls and recommendations being made in '99. We know calls for further technological advances, which we know already exist after MH370 went away. Do you think this will increase the calls once again, or do you think we might be closer to maybe having some of those technologies implemented?
You know, I think certainly in the hours before the aircraft was found, the pressure was again mounting for better tracking, better surveillance of aircraft. We have the ability to know where aircraft are in real time and for them to be sending information directly to ground and to other stations about their position, about what's happening. And I think there was a lot of pressure after 370 to make that happen. And I think not finding the aircraft until today, that was another pressure that was operating. But Jim raises a good point. There's a lot of new technology out there, whether it's video in the cockpit to really see what was going on, or recorders, deployable recorders, or simultaneous transmission. There's more that can be done to improve safety.
So let's talk about that flight data recorder. We know that it is sort of the all-important missing piece right now. Obviously, the priority is recovering the bodies so the families can get some measure of closure. They can begin the burial and funeral process. But that flight data recorder is going to provide answers. Tell us how quickly we could see information once it's in our hands or in the hands of authorities, that they can then download that information and crunch through what happened.
You know, for sure, the next 24, 48 hours really belong to the recovery operations, looking for those bodies to be able to support the families. But the investigators are going to be looking for the location of those recorders. We're looking for really redundant recorders, making sure that we have good data both on the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. We're looking for 2 hours on the cockpit voice recorder and potentially hundreds of parameters on the flight data recorder. They pull those out. The most important thing is really to preserve that evidence, to not damage it as you're removing it, and then you're getting it out of the water, making sure you keep it wet so that you don't lose the data that's on there, and so that it can be dried in an appropriate manner to be read.
I know it's conjecture, Jim, but at this point, when we know where the debris was spotted, the troubles the pilot was said to be trying to get around in terms of those incredibly large thunderstorms, some 50 kilometers wide in some estimates. Did it seem to you that that was a dangerous area or time to be flying, or did there seem to you that there was something else that went wrong with this flight?
Well, we really don't know, and the recorders hopefully will tell most of the story. But that's why cameras in the cockpit are so important. It'll give us an idea, a visual idea of the conditions the crew was facing and the actions that they took in regard to trying to safely maneuver the aircraft. And of course, again, I underscore the fact that this is an unacceptable amount of time for a rescue to hope to have survivors alive. And that's why I'm so for and have always been for these deployable recorders that are used in the military.
Deborah, you know, we just saw the CEO and the president of Indonesia speaking at a news conference there. We monitor it to see what they would say. And I was thinking about the fact that there has been, you know, the families always want more answers. It has been fairly transparent for them. The families have been given a fair amount of information from what we can tell on the ground. I imagine that's a challenge for investigators, weighing how much information you come public with, how much information you sort of keep to your own until you can confirm it and double check. How do they make that balance? It must be very delicate.
You know, in many places there are protocols established for how you deal with the family members. In the U.S., we make every effort to brief the family members first before information is shared with the media. Everyone is facing a really difficult challenge in an environment like this, and I think particularly when they didn't know where the aircraft was and they didn't know much, they didn't have a lot to share. But I think everyone learned from the 370 experience to really put those families first and to keep them in the loop, even if you don't know a lot, to let them know what you know.
We can only imagine that the finding of the debris from this aircraft is only making worse the knowledge for the families of Flight 370 that they still have no answers. Jim Hall, Deborah Hersman, we thank you for your time and your expertise. Thanks for joining us here on New Day. We know the U.S. Navy